Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's nothing but bangers, aka MBB, aka bangers, aka I've got some incredible new engines to share with you for your potential next deck that you want to cook with. But I'm going to get into those details on how these engines work and how you can use them. And I've also got a top 15 for the Celestial Guardian set coming up very soon as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that video coming up very soon. Let's jump into it. The first few engines that I'm going to be going over are going to include rare candy technology. So just to kind of get everybody caught up to date, I did a video about engines a long time ago. It's been a long time. I mean, this was talking about like Drudagon and Leaf. Okay, so like those were pretty new cards at the time. But think of an engine in the context of this video of being basically maybe 2 cards to maybe as many as 4 cards, right? So, 2 to 4 cards, and you can maybe play as many as 2 of each copy. So when I say an engine, it means it's kind of like a sub part of your deck, and you can add something else that's maybe your main win condition, that's maybe your main attacker. But this is kind of an idea that basically, hey, I can add this engine into a deck that I'm thinking of, okay? So that's kind of the idea behind engines. And if you use PokemonMeta.com, you will notice that they do have kind of like a little bit of an engine category as well to try to understand and differentiate the different parts of the decks, that you may come across. But this is one of my favorite variants that I've seen in terms of a new engine. This is going to be 2 Cannon, which is going to be a stage 2, 140 HP. It's a normal type Pokemon with 2 retreat, but for 1 energy, it deals 70 damage. Now, recently we saw somebody pilot this in the Frog EX tournament. They are pairing it, I believe, with like Meowscarada, I think that's it. But basically, the way to think about this is you're already playing rare candy, right? So now you're just adding 5 more cards to your deck. Maybe you're adding 4 more cards to your deck. You can even maybe add as little as 3 cards to your deck that are featuring something like a Pick-a-Peck or a Trumbink, right? Because that's going to be like the rest of the line. But the maximum amount of cards that you're adding to your deck outside of rare candy, I think, should be 5 in this case. But basically what you're getting out of adding this engine is that early aggression that may actually donk your opponent, right? So the best case scenario is you go first, right? You open with the basic, right? You got Pick-a-Peck in the active, and you pass your turn. Your opponent has a basic in play. Maybe it's 50, 60 HP. Maybe it's 70 HP. They do whatever and pass. If they don't play any other Pokemon or they don't get above 70 HP, there's the potential that you can just rare candy into 2 Cannon and donk them right then and there. So whatever the rest of your deck is, it doesn't even matter because 2 Cannon just cleaned it up, right? The other way to think about this is a 50 HP basic. And so if you can play a deck that maybe focuses on also running something like Giant Cape, you can also keep your Pick-a-Peck potentially out of harm's way by putting a Giant Cape on it so it doesn't get one-shotted by maybe a Carnivine or an opposing Skarmory. But again, the main reason why I really like this engine is because if I'm already playing rare candy, I may want to add this to my deck to maybe add some early game aggression, or maybe I'm already playing something like a Rampardos that is already going to be aggressive. So if I open rare candy Rampardos, I'm swinging for 130. If I open 2 Cannon rare candy, then I'm swinging for 70. And either way, I've got my secondary strategy or my main strategy hopefully getting built up over the rest of the game. And the other thing about this is 140 HP. There's not a lot of things that can just knock this out on like the turn 4 of the game, right? Or even turn 5, right? Assuming you go second. So again, like this is just a very aggressive stage 2, and think of it as like Beedrill, but Beedrill and the base Beedrill from Genetic Apex. But think about it like this is going to be something that's a lot easier to splash. Now there's other ways to kind of build around this card, but again, I do like it in those aggressive decks that are trying to push tempo really soon. Another engine that you could think about using is going to be the Frog engine. This is pretty standard. I'm sure everybody's familiar with this, but with Rare Candy being introduced to the game, it's always good to highlight some things that we know are good in the game. Greninja has been relevant since the very first set of Pokemon TCG Pocket. So if you're looking for a way to also play Greninja, then this is going to be another option for a deck that may already be playing Rare Candy. I wouldn't necessarily just include just this engine. I would probably like want to add, another stage 2 already in the deck. But in the event that, maybe you already have a nice basic attacker, maybe you have a nice stage 1 attacker like Crabominable, right, EX, then here you go. You got your little Greninja engine that you can add to that deck as well and maybe finish out the rest of your deck. Now, obviously, the big perks are going to be if you can play Water Energy, so that way you can also maybe potentially attack with Greninja mid to late game, or maybe even on curve to finish something off. The cool thing about this is, remember, Frogadier is a colorless attacker, so if you ever get into a bind and you need to attack with this Frogadier, you're able to do that with just about any deck that plays energy, right? So again, another good option that's very versatile. It's a good thing to also think about this card when you're playing EX Pokemon, because if you're playing a deck with nothing but EX attackers, and Oricorio, the electric Oricorio that prevents all EX damages, this could be a way that you kind of play around that Oricorio card. Now, it may take a while for you to KO it, right? Because it could have 90 HP with the Giant Cape, but this gives you an out against Oricorio, and also, could give you a way to finish things off that maybe retreat to the bench and so on. So again, these two engines, I think, definitely are pretty different, right? You have one that's supposed to be like super aggressive, and then the other one is kind of like more controlling, right? Kind of, timely 20 damage every now and then, right? So again, you've got two different ways to approach Rare Candy if you wanted to splash either of these concepts into your deck as a nice little engine. Another engine that you may be interested in is the Dusknoir engine. Now, honestly, this could be played in many different numbers as well, just like the other engines that I've mentioned with Rare Candy. This is going to focus on getting Dusknoir out. And the thing about Dusknoir is it's got 130 HP. And the thing that I don't like about this is that like the retreat cost is pretty high on the stage 1. On the basic, it's only 1, so there you go. But the way that you would use this Pokemon is basically you would use it to soak damage, right? So basically, let's just say that you're attacking, with a basic Pokemon or a stage 1 Pokemon, whatever. So you're attacking, your opponent attacks it, but doesn't knock it out. Well, with Rare Candy and Dusknoir, you can move the damage counters to Dusknoir. And the thing that not a lot of people realize about Dusknoir is that you can actually move more damage than it can take onto it. So let's just say that you have, an Incineroar EX that's taking 150 damage, and you move it onto the Dusknoir. Well, it's going to KO the Dusknoir. But the thing is, if you've moved 80 damage onto that Dusknoir, you can still move that 150 damage from Incineroar onto your Dusknoir. So just keep in mind, this gives you the ability to overload the Dusknoir from damage, right? As long as it's like damage from one Pokemon. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with it. The thing about this is, again, you could splash this on its own and maybe get some results, but it is going to take up a pretty big number of cards in your deck. But again, you also have the option of saying, hey, well, if I'm already playing a stage 2, maybe I tech this in so that way I can kind of continue keeping my stage 2 alive. And there also is the option to like just play this card kind of like as a 1/1/1 line, right? And then still include Rare Candy for your other stage 2. So you've got a lot of options, but again, these are 3 different options with Rare Candy, 3 different engines that are very splashable in a lot of different decks, and all give you a different way to play the game. So let me know what you think about these Rare Candy engines, and let's hop into some of the other engines from this latest set. Decidueye is another, or Decidueye, however you want to pronounce it. I guess Decidueye is probably like the correct way, and I'm probably going to get a bunch of comments about it. But anyway, so Decidueye is another basically engine that you can run as a primary attacker. And basically the thing about Decidueye is you can play it in a deck that doesn't run Grass Energy. The one thing that if you do that, you're going to probably want to pair it with something like Dredagon, something like Greninja, something like Spiritomb, something like Lurantis, right? But if you're playing Lurantis, you're playing Grass Energy. So again, like you're going to need something that complements Decidueye a lot of the time if you're not playing that Grass Energy to spread damage around. But again, this is just another option that you can use. And you could say, yeah, this is definitely a rare candy engine, but this is more a primary focus, right? Like if you're playing this, I would assume that this is your primary attacker, right? Not like an alternate win condition like a Toucannon, not an alternate win condition like a Greninja, not an alternate like defensive option like a Dusknoir. This is a offensive option and arguably your primary attacker. Now there's different ways to cook with this card. I'm not going to go into all of those because I know some of those are going to be kept a little bit in secret until we get to maybe some more tournaments that are in this meta, but I can't wait to talk about those when they become more popular. But this is definitely an engine that you can cook with, and Decidueye with the green cape can get to a whopping 200 HP. So again, like this is a bulky Pokemon that can be a primary attacker that you can use rare candy with. And then also just keep in mind, you want to complement it, right? You want to complement it with other cards. Maybe you pair it with Greninja, maybe you pair it with Spiritomb. There's different ways to cook with this card, but this is just a good engine that can be a primary attacker. I call this the Puka Nakua engine. And let's just kind of break this down for a second, right? So honestly, you don't have to play Dredagon and you don't have to play Rocky Helmet. Like you can use 2 of these cards in an engine, right? But let's just kind of talk about this for a second. So we all know, we're very aware of Dredagon, right? Dredagon is going to take a lot of damage, right? A lot of the time, and it's going to take multiple times to knock it out unless your opponent just has a big boss EX that's knocking it out. And cards like Rocky Helmet that pair very nicely with Dredagon. Well, think of Pyukumuku as the same thing. Pyukumuku is basically going to say, hey, if you're playing water energy in the stack, you can chip for 20 damage with your Pyukumuku. And then also, if they knock it out, they're going to get 50 damage if Pyukumuku was in the active spot and knocked out by an attack. So you could potentially get as much as 70 damage and maybe even higher amounts of damage with Pyukumuku just by attacking. When you combo that with a poison barb, for example, that poisons it and now they're taking 10 damage in every checkup phase, or when you combo it with something like a Rocky Helmet, you have the potential to do a lot of damage for just a one prize Pokemon that may even kind of make your opponent like not want to attack. But the thing is, if they don't attack, if you're playing water energy, you can still chip them for 20 damage a turn. So again, like I put Dredagon in this engine, but obviously you only have to play Pyukumuku and maybe Poison Barb, or Pyukumuku and maybe just Rocky Helmet. You could just use either of those, right? You don't have to use all 8 of these cards, right? That's not necessary at all. And again, like there's a pro and con to playing water energies with Pyukumuku. It may kind of lower the options that you can combine Pyukumuku with, but it does give you that extra tempo of 20 damage per turn that could potentially like actually change the game for you. So again, as far as one prize Pokemon that can stall but also be aggressive, it seems to me like Pyukumuku is like a different alternative version of Dredagon in a lot of ways, but also like you have to remember it does have to be in the active, so you are incentivized to kind of like play water energy with it, and that kind of leads you to try to cook with other water Pokemon that are in the game, right? Obviously you've got Greninja, you've got Cradominable, like you've got other water Pokemon that you can pair it with and potentially get more mileage out of it. I wouldn't want to play this card most likely if I wasn't playing water energy, but you can still do that. So again, there's some different things that you can cook with this Puka Nakua engine, and I definitely think that we're going to be seeing a lot of this card in the coming weeks. The Snorlax engine. So Snorlax, we've seen the Berry Snorlax technology, but now we've got Elima We've also got Poison Barb. So there's a lot of different ways that you can play this Snorlax engine. And again, just like the engine that I just mentioned with Pyukumuku and Druddigon, you don't have to play 10 of these cards, right? You can play Berry, Snorlax, and Barb. You don't have to play the Alima. You don't have to play the Rocky Helmets. But basically, this is just giving you options for when you try to start deck building. And the thing about this is, much like Toucannon, because Snorlax requires any sort of energy, right, to attack, it's a normal type, right, then you can splash this a lot easier than some of the other cards that you may see in some of these engines. Now, Snorlax is going to absorb a lot of damage, especially because it has 140 HP. So that gives a little bit of value out of cards like Rocky Helmet and Poison Barb. And the ultimate wombo combo is when you're able to actually use it to attack by the trainer card Berry, right? So that supporter Berry basically is going to knock it down to a 2 energy attacker that's maybe doing 100 damage. And the thing is, if you've had a Poison Barb or a Rocky Helmet on it, then your opponent's Pokemon may have already taken some chip damage. So again, I look forward to seeing a lot of this engine in different forms, right? Again, just maybe the Berry and the Snorlax and the tool, one of the tools, right? Maybe somebody just decides to say, hey, let's just play Berry and Elima, right? I don't want to play the other tools. That's fine too. But again, I do think that this is a good option for some decks that are looking for maybe a little bit of time to build up a Pokemon on their bench. Maybe they're trying to pair maybe something that's a little bit more of a mid-range attacker, right? That's what they're looking for. Well, Snorlax can definitely be a little bit of a mid-range attacker, right? 2 energies to attack for 100 with Berry. That's a nice combination. And again, if you're playing something that rare candies, maybe there's a little bit of synergy there. If you're playing something that ramps energy like a Manaphy, maybe there's some synergy there. But again, Snorlax is a great wool, and when you include cards like Poison Barb or Rocky Helmet, you can get some extra damage out of your Snorlax as well. And then if you combine it with stuff like Berry or Elima, you can even get more mileage out of your Snorlax. So I think that these are very good ways to play Snorlax, and it's up to you to decide like which trainers and which supporters do you want to pair with your Snorlax engine. The Lycanroc engine. So this engine is a lot smaller than some of the other engines that we've talked about in this video. It's a 4-card engine, and it really just kind of pairs well into the fighting archetype. So you can picture something like this going with Rampardos and Rare Candy. You could picture this with something like a 1-prize fighting deck that's maybe focusing on something like Lucario and Riolu as well. Maybe there's even a little bit of traction in the future for something like Passimian to be played alongside this. But again, Passimian, I think it's a little bit weak. It's a little bit hard to work with right now. But again, the main thing that you're going to want to splash this Lycanroc engine with is going to be Rampardos. There's other options that you can definitely do with. And hey, the other thing is, if you're playing alternative formats like no EX, that could also be a format where this engine finds a nice home. But if you don't know what this does, Rockruff has Signs of Evolution, which I am begging for them to make an Eevee like this. But basically, it allows you to search your deck for a card that Rockruff evolves into, right? So you basically get to search this Lycanroc, and this Lycanroc for 2 energy, it's going to deal 50 damage. And if your opponent has more remaining HP, your opponent's Pokemon has more remaining HP, it does 50 more damage. So this attack can hit for 100 for 2 energy, and that's going to be able to deal a lot of damage to other Pokemon EXs a lot of the time, right? Because a lot of the time your opponent's Pokemon EX is going to have more than 100 HP, right? And so that's going to allow you to go ahead and do that extra damage. And so if you do 100 one turn and then 50 the next turn, that's 150 damage over 2 turns, right? So that's pretty decent. And again, like, it's found a home in the Rampardos rare candy lists, and I think that that's a very solid list right now, because again, basically you're automatically opening with the Rockruff, and so now you know that you have a little bit of tempo to go ahead and get Rockruff to evolve into Lycanroc and hopefully deal some damage. It can get a little bit dicey if you're going, maybe if you're going first, because your Rockruff is not going to be able to evolve, and maybe it gets a little bit of damage and maybe sets it behind. But the thing is, if it doesn't get one hit KO'd, you're kind of happy that it took damage, because now your Lycanroc can get that second energy and start swinging for 100. So again, really cool little alternative way to play some cards alongside Rampardos, and maybe alongside some cards like Lucario and Riolu. But again, I do really like this Lycanroc engine. Okay, so let's get to a little bit of anti-meta, right? So this is the anti-EX retreat engine. Basically, you're going to be able to play all 6 of these cards. We've seen some other players actually play a deck dedicated to this kind of idea. And honestly, with this engine, I do believe you have flexibility as well. I don't think you have to play 2 Tapu Kokos to go alongside your Oricorios that are electric types. I also don't even think you need the Shaman necessarily, but if you want to play and dedicate 6 spaces to this engine, there's the 6 spaces. The reason why I say that you can get away with not playing double Tapu Koko is because once you get 1 Tapu Koko, you're usually pretty set for the rest of the game, and that allows you to add more space for other Pokemon. So this is a very aggressive kind of like anti-meta kind of way of playing this. And although it doesn't have 1 energy attackers and I'm calling it aggressive, I'm basically saying that, hey, this is going to be a deck that some people just can't deal with, right? Like wishy-washy decks just like straight up can't deal with Oricorio. And now, you know, you're the main synergy that you're going to have is, you know, if Oricorio is attacking, you know, it's attacking for 50, right? And blocking all EX damage. But the main synergy is going to be Shaman on the bench, Tapu Koko with 3 energy in the active, and then Oricorio on the bench. And basically you attack with the Tapu Koko, deal 70, and Tapu Koko allows you to switch, actually it forces you to switch with one of your electric Pokemon that are on the bench. Okay, now it is worth noting, it will not retreat if you don't have any electric Pokemon on your bench. So like, there you go, there's a little bit of weird, maybe it pops up every now and then, probably won't, but that's definitely a case. But basically the synergy is Tapu Koko switches into Oricorio, and if your opponent has, you know, nothing but EXs, they're basically walled, right? And you can keep swinging for 70 and pivoting. And the other thing is too, Shaman gives you that free retreat for your basic Pokemon. So now all of your Pokemon that are Oricorio or Tapu Koko have free retreat. Now there are different ways that you could kind of play this with other Pokemon. You could still splash other electric type Pokemon. You could maybe even splash it with something like a Magnezone. You could splash this with something like Pikachu or Pachirisu. However, this deck is going to have a really hard time beating, or this engine is going to have a really hard time dealing with Rampardos. So if you're trying to figure out what to pair this with, I would probably start thinking like, how do I beat Rampardos? Is there anything that I can tech that maybe makes that matchup a little bit better? Because otherwise it just may be an auto loss, right? And that's pretty rough, right? But again, it's a cute engine. You'll get a lot of people to just instantly concede whenever they see Oricorio in the active, and it's hilarious. It really is. The last engine that I want to talk to you guys about is a little bit of a psychic engine regarding Banette, Tapu Lele, and in some cases, even the Psychic Oricorio that has an attack that's very similar to Marshadow. If one of your Pokemon was knocked out for 1 energy, it deals 20 plus 60 more damage. The Banette, it deals 30 damage, but it blocks your opponent from attaching an energy to their active Pokemon next turn. And Tapu Lele is for 1 energy. It's going to deal 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon that has energy, and it's going to deal 20 per energy that they have. So if they have a Pokemon with 3 energy on their bench, it's going to deal 60 to it, right? You get to choose which Pokemon, but it has to be a Pokemon with energy. So this is a nice little package that you can throw into a few different Psychic decks. I've seen people trying to play this alongside Giratina. There's also people that, you know, maybe want to cook with this in some other different ways. But again, it's a cool little engine that you can build around. You don't have to play all these cards. Just like I keep mentioning, you can kind of splash and cut some of these cards. Like you may just really not like Oricorio, and you might want to just stick with just like 1 Tapu Lele, 2 Banette, right? Or hey, maybe you really like Tapu Lele the way that the meta is shaping up. So you're playing 2 Tapu Lele and, you know, 2 Oricorio, right? No stage 1s. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of add this engine and kind of modify it to your own deck's requirements. But again, just kind of thinking about like what this kind of pairs with, it's going to probably pair with kind of you want to have something that you're probably loading up on the bench, because all of these attacks are like 1 energy, right? So you probably want to pair this with something that maybe has like a little bit more of an expensive nuke attack. That's why something like a Mewtwo, something like a Giratina, even though you won't be able to use Giratina's effect all the time, maybe that's something that you can kind of cook with. And again, like, hey, maybe there's even something that sparks your interest with, like, maybe you play some of these Pokemon and then you play Lunala EX along with maybe something like a Mewtwo or a Giratina. So there's different ways to cook with this, but these Pokemon are nice little kind of techs that can make a little engine that can be pretty aggressive and provide some early game tempo. And for some decks that maybe don't play a ton of Pokemon, maybe they're all in on some EXs, although you're not playing the electric or Oricorio to stop damage, but if they only have 1 Pokemon, you keep hitting it with Banette, they're just stuck on that energy, right? They can't take any energy from their energy zone, right? It would need to be from like their discard pile, right? So like there's very few supporters that even do that. So again, just a cool little engine that you can use if you're trying to build a psychic deck, and it's just got some cool little tech options that you can kind of modify and kind of change the number of. But again, these are all very fun engines that I think are pretty new to the game with the newest set. I hope that you enjoyed them, and stay tuned for my top 15 cards from Celestial Guardians in my next video. So thanks for letting me be background noise. Maybe you learned something, or hey, maybe it was just entertaining to you. But until next time, I'll catch you later. Peace.